Good evening, everyone. It is the Finance Committee meeting for October 13th, 2021. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to go through the quick opening for the remote meeting procedures. Reminder that this meeting is being recorded and is televised on ECAT. And then I will do a roll call vote to establish quorum, and then we'll dive into our agenda. So first and foremost, in keeping with the ongoing emergency order from Governor Charlie Baker to limit gatherings and maximize social distancing, and under legislation passed to address remote board meetings during the emergency declaration, this meeting will be conducted remotely over Zoom. Attendance by board/commission members will be remote, and remote attendance shall count towards quorum. The meeting will be broadcast live and recorded on ECAT. There's some additional information on how to get in Zoom, etc., which I typically don't read, but the key piece here is that all voting will be by roll call. Kelly has joined. So once Kelly is on and once Mike is fully on, his camera if possible, Mike, I miss your face. I will kick off with a roll call vote.
I miss your face too.
Thanks, buddy. That's in the meeting minutes now. That's good. Where's my list? All right. So for roll call, just to remind everybody, we're going to go down the list. You are going to be called upon. Just say your last name and present, and that will officially kick us off. Diaz.
Diaz present.
Do this in, oh, I already messed up the alphabetical. DiNardo.
DiNardo present.
Olson.
Olson present.
Lamb.
Lamb present.
DePietro.
DePietro present.
Vimosi.
Vimosi present.
And Patrick Helen, pretending to be the town of Easton, is present. All right, everybody. So tonight we've got essentially just really two things on the docket. I did want to give you guys a quick update on meeting minutes. I spoke to Brian about this the other night, but there's a lot of meeting minutes that we have outstanding and some that need to be updated to the site. So our next meeting, which is going to be the second Wednesday, we will be reviewing any outstanding pieces and whatnot, and probably voting on a bunch of meeting minutes. For the people that were not in attendance. Oh, there's Robert. For those minutes, Connor, I'm always torn on this. If they watch or if they view a meeting, theoretically they could vote to accept the meeting minutes without any issue. Is there any consideration about having to be present and part of those minutes to vote for?
They don't even need to watch. They're not. I mean, technically the responsibility of the minutes of the secretary taking those minutes. It's not the responsibility of the finance committee members to attest to the veracity of them. Obviously, I think there's a kind of assumption that you're doing so, but you're really voting to accept the minutes as presented by the recording secretary rather than kind of editorialize or approve them. You know, folks catch typos and things like that, but the stuff that should be reflected in minutes is supposed to be pretty incontrovertible. You know, these people were there, these people were not, these votes were taken by these people. So you don't need to have been on the committee to vote to accept a set of minutes.
Even better. Well, then we will cover that next meeting. Stacy, thanks to Stacy, she sent me a couple of them. All caught up through the last few meetings that we had. So we'll go through the voting process on those, and we'll get those into the official record. So having said that, tonight we are looking at the remaining warrant articles, which I've captured as, where is my list? Remaining ones for us are 1, 6, 7, and 9. 5, if anything has come up since the last meeting of outstanding. But the goal tonight, very similar to the way we went through last time, is to run through the remaining. I'll read them out. We have both Connor and Wendy here to address the sort of matter of those different articles, if there's any additional questions, but also just to weigh in on them and give a good understanding of it. The benefit for the people that are new on the committee is that there might be some additional detail that you can glean out of that. So do not be shy if you have questions. And then we will move to a vote. And then the last, as I was saying before, the other piece is just really the cluster assignment. We have subcommittees currently booked up, but we have cluster assignments to go through. We'll let Wendy and Connor graciously bow out before we drag them through that, but we should be able to get through these pretty quickly and easily tonight if there's no huge controversial changes that we've seen. Wendy's smiling, so maybe she's gone through and added some new line items. We'll find out. Thrilling stuff here at FinCom headquarters. So before I make more stupid jokes, Article 1, the transfer to the stabilization fund, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate or appropriate by transfer from available funds a sum of money to be placed into the stabilization fund or take any other action relative thereto. The explanation is this article moves $1,175,000 of available free cash to the stabilization fund in accordance with the town's financial management guidelines and the ongoing goal to build up reserves. Once transferred, the balance of the stabilization fund will be $4,730,148. Connor and or Wendy, do you guys want to do a quick snapshot preamble of what this is and just give us an idea?
Sure. So first, congratulations again to Jay, Brian, and Robert, and thank you for volunteering yourselves for Finance Committee. We appreciate it, and welcome aboard 2 weeks before town meeting. So this article is pretty standard on our special town meeting warrants in the fall. The town has a set of financial management principles that are on the town's financial management information website, which was one of the links I provided to the Finance Committee last week. These are a set of basically best business practices for municipalities that the select board adopted in 2016. At the time, there was a failed override attempt, and one of the kind of pieces that came out of that was really prioritizing the town's reserve position. And our reserve position is made up of two things. It's our free cash, which is excess funding available at the close of a fiscal year, either from unspent operating funds or excess revenues we collected in above and beyond what we had projected. So that's for free cash. And then stabilization fund, which is basically the rainy day fund that we take money typically from free cash and plug into with the kind of express intent of having that be there for periods of economic downturn or instability, including such as what we're living through. We've worked quite hard to build the reserve balance of the town and add to the stabilization fund. And one of the pieces of those financial management principles is that we would put a quarter of the available free cash every year into the stabilization account. So for those mathematically inclined, you can multiply that amount by 4, and that gets you to not a specific agenda item, but a relatively noteworthy one that we're anticipating free cash from fiscal 22 to be roughly $4.7 million, which is much healthier than we would have assumed when we were setting the budget during COVID, and is one of the higher amounts, if not the highest we've seen. There's a lot of kind of really strange and one-time factors influencing that, the availability of CARES and other federal disaster funds through FEMA to reduce pressure on operating budgets on the school and town side, resulting in large departmental turnbacks for 22, particularly for the schools that we would not anticipate of this size again. And then there are other aspects on the revenue side where we were very conservative in our projection of revenues, such as local receipts like building permits. And as everyone probably knows, if you read the news, building is the real problem with building and housing is that there's not enough people and supplies to build as much as everyone wants. So it's the complete opposite of what we would have kind of traditionally expected in a period of economic instability. Obviously, real estate values are through the roof. Home improvement projects are constant. Everyone got tired of looking at their kitchen in quarantine, and they all pulled permits at once. So our fiscal 22 building permit revenue is actually 50% above what we budgeted, which is great. Building department's exceptionally busy. And they're doing a great job trying to triage and keep up. So a few factors like that came together that we didn't anticipate and led to this large free cash certification. So what that does is if we take 25% of it, that's 1.175 million. That'll put stabilization at 4.7 million. In 2016, stabilization was 1.3 million. So this is a significant, we'll have more than tripled that. And then I have to give the obvious caveat that while this is great progress, this puts our net reserves prior to capital spending somewhere in $7 to $8 million range, which is great. It's the right direction, but the financial management, we have a fund balance policy that targets 10% of our general fund budget as the kind of minimum threshold we want to have in the bank. And this is, for the first time ever, just starting to flirt with that line. So we need to continue to exercise fiscal restraint. So it's good news, but need to kind of keep our foot on the gas pedal, so to speak. So this would comply with those policies and build our reserves. If anyone has any questions about any of that or the town's reserves, I'm happy to answer them.
Connor, I just have one. You said it was 1.6 million roughly in 2016. Is that correct for the stabilization fund?
I can get you the.
I don't need the specifics. I just.
It was 1.59 million.
1.5.
In fiscal 15, it was 1.37. So now it will be 4.7 and change.
That's awesome. Thank you. Does anyone else have any other questions? No, I was waiting for Mike to say no because he usually has something. So seeing none, I will take a motion to approve Article 1, the transfer to the stabilization fund.
Motion to approve Article 1 to Petro.
Do I have a second?
Yes, second.
Yes, second. Thank you. All right, I'm going to go back down my list here. So I get to it. All right. Same structure as before. Name and your vote. Diaz.
Diaz, yes.
DiNardo.
DiNardo, yes.
Olson.
Olson, yes.
Lamb.
Lamb, yes.
DePietro.
Yes.
Mimosi.
Mosi, yes.
Thank you. And Helen is yes. Article 1 is recommended. All right.
I think you forgot Robert.
Think you did.
Oh, I did. Robert, I'm sorry. I didn't write you down because you came in right towards the end. Let me jump back in. Sorry about that. Jenkins.
All right, Jenkins, yes.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, Michael. Sorry about that, man. I saw you come in, but I didn't write you down earlier, so
No problem.
my bad. We're very happy to have you, though. All right, so Article 1 is passed. Let's jump to Article 6, I believe.
Yes, 5's just a placeholder. Nothing's changed
Yeah.
there. So 6, again, this is a pretty routine article for a fall town meeting where we make any adjustments to the already adopted operating budget, which was approved in May for the current fiscal year based on anything that's come up since, on the revenue projection side that are now starting to see some actuals, and similarly for the expense side. Normally it's relatively business-like and unspectacular, but real policy level stuff happens in the annual budget. That changed last year during COVID because everything changed during COVID. I'm happy to report this is kind of getting back to boring business. So it's kind of all there in the explanation. This would adjust the fiscal 22 operating budget that was adopted in May on basically things on the margins, a couple of tweaks for staff and training costs for the assessing department, funds for the fire department to implement the collective bargaining agreement that's since been ratified for a 1-year extension in this current year. Regional school assessments. So the Southeastern Regional School Assessment was built on a budget that assumed an allocation of federal ESSER $2 that the regional district was getting, and they were operating under the belief that they could effectively offset municipal district assessments for this year by dipping into those federal dollars. That is not actually going to be the case, so we need to make up the difference. So that's where that comes from. And so that's it on the increase side. On the expenditure side for a decrease, we're actually going to be decreasing the exempt debt budget. So that's the debt service budget for the principal and interest for bonds associated with debt exclusion override projects. In this case, for the ongoing school building project, kind of counter to the narrative of consumer prices, the bids came in under budget on that. The project's moving along. And the number that we had anticipated for the annual borrowing cost this year was almost $750,000 higher than what we now know it will be. We're selling, or we sold the bonds this week, and they'll be issued on Monday by the select board. So that'll be a decrease to that exempt debt of $729,000 for this year, which, I mean, really is kind of no taxpayer feels it this way, but that means taxes will actually be slightly less than what we thought they would be. They're still going to go up, just less up. So it's really a good thing. So that's great news. And so that's incorporated into there as well. So I don't know if anyone has any questions about any of those component pieces.
A quick question, Connor. I had a chance to think about this since the budget subcom earlier.
Yes.
When we're reducing that number, are the bonds already sold and we're not allocating the money, or is it we're opting to not sell the bonds in this period, and so therefore there's less debt to service?
So we are permanently financing portions of our cost as construction advances, because you can only roll short-term notes for so long. This is the bulk of it, I believe, Wendy, right? It's 35 million. We anticipate that we will sell another 10 to 15 million in bonds next year for the remainder, as the project is scheduled to complete potentially as soon as the end of next year. So as those costs become final and actual, we would bond the remaining 10 to 15 million. The reason for the decrease is that the actual construction costs are less than what we budgeted and used for our bond forecast models.
I understand that's where the delta comes from. I'm just wondering from a cash management point of view, is it we have obtained the cash via the debt offer, debt placement, whatever you call it, and we're going to set that aside until it's needed, or are we not issuing the associated 729, whatever the number is? And I'm asking just from the point of view of, if we've already issued it, obviously we need to start servicing it whatever the terms of the debt were, versus we're delaying that increase in taxation to a future time. It's like
there will still be another kind of proportional increase in the exempt debt in, Wendy, I believe the next 2 fiscal years as the permanent financing comes online.
Yes.
This decrease this year is reflective of cash flow. We haven't changed our cash flow anticipations. It's that the increments being permanently financed are shrinking. I don't know if I'm still misunderstanding, but Wendy, you want to help me out?
Yeah, well, when we set the budget, we had anticipated that we were going to be borrowing also more money and at a higher interest rate. But interest rates were so favorable that we opted to just bond 35 million now, so that we could lock in those rates. And we actually just sold those bonds today. So we will have that money on hand when the funds come in, but we anticipate that it will be, spent out pretty rapidly. I mean, we've had some payment requests from the contractor that have, been around 4 million.
Sure.
So,
I've no doubt it's just that 729. I was just curious if it's basically sitting in an account until it's needed, so to
no,
speak.
the 729 is just, we're decreasing what we had budgeted.
Right. Okay.
For that. And so we estimated that we were going to raise
yet.
that from taxation when we go to set the tax rate this year, but we're not going to need to add that much on top of the levy this particular year. There will, there'll be another increase next year, because this year what you've got is only a 6-month interest payment. So the way the bonds work, where we pay the debt services, we make 2 payments a year. One is a semi-annual interest payment, and the other is the other semi-annual interest payment plus a principal payment. So the way the borrowing falls, we'll only get that first 6 months this particular year.
And it will be ever so slightly smaller. Okay.
And next year it'll increase because we'll have principal payments.
Yep, understood. Thanks.
Anyone else have any questions on what are we on 6?
I do. Just humor me on this one. Where is the extra money that you need here in 6 coming from? Is that already just a part of, you're just realigning some budgets to make this work?
Yeah, I believe, Wendy, that we would basically just be reshuffling the allocation of what we had projected of available revenue based on the decrease of the debt service, right?
Sure. No, that's fair.
Or and also where part of this would be that we would be plugging in new growth as an actual rather than an estimate. And I believe that's slightly above our estimates. And we would, I think, have some marginal adjustments on our projected local receipts, particularly on building permits. Now that we know, right, Wendy?
Yes.
Yes. Now that we know, so we built the fiscal 22, the current fiscal year budget projections off of fiscal 21 budget, not fiscal 21 actuals, because the books weren't closed yet. So we now know that our building permit estimations for fiscal 21 were way low. So we can, with reasonable confidence, bump up our estimates for the current fiscal year now in order to adjust for those new expenses.
And then take that bump up to apply that cash to these items here.
Yes.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you.
It's a good question.
Yep.
Also, I just wanted to mention too, so as far as like funding sources for this go, there was also a collective bargaining reserve line item set aside in the employee benefits and insurance budget, and that was 65,000. So 64,176 of that for the fire budget is going to come from that reserve. So it's really just a transfer within the budget. It's not new money. And some money, we're also going to increase the water debt service. We need a little extra money for that. That's going to come from just, water revenues. And $8,344 will come from septic betterment receipts also.
Sorry, the finance guy in me now is intrigued on the debt for the debt service on the water.
Mhm.
Is that, did you have a variable rate bond or something, or what was the increase for?
So what happened, we had estimated, we had a ban outstanding. And so we had estimated what the interest costs might be. And the interest costs came in a little bit different, but then we also decided with this bond issue to include some of the water debt that we had already authorized. So
Okay.
some of that is, this bond issue was part of that number.
That's fair. Thank you.
And just on that note, I think, I can't remember, Brian, if it was you or one of the candidates interviewing referenced, the town's ongoing efforts with PFAS treatment for water, and that's what some of this debt will be.
Yeah.
And the board is already, the select board are also the water commissioners and the sewer commissioners and the rent control board. And they've already adopted a multi-year increase rate study reflective of the green sand plant. That's the $15.6 million debt authorization from this spring for water. And they will need to be adjusting rates up again incrementally to incorporate in the new debt for PFAS as well.
Sure. No, thank you for that. It was just curious to me that, when I think of debt service, I think maybe we had a variable rate or something of that nature, and you went the wrong way, but I appreciate the explanation.
Sure. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Anybody
Motion
else?
to recommend Article 6.
So nobody else. We've got a motion on the table. Do I have a second for the motion to recommend Article 6?
Donardo, second.
Look at these guys coming out of the gate. Love the new people that are just jumping in. It's great.
I'm
All
trying
right,
to get
we're
this
gonna
in
list.
before bedtime.
All right, my man. Diaz.
Yes.
DiNardo.
Donardo, yes.
Olson.
Olson, yes.
Lamb.
Lamb, yes.
Petro.
Peter, yes.
Vamosi.
Vamosi, I must respectfully abstain.
Okay, abstain. Helen is a yes, and Jenkins.
Jenkins is a yes.
Thank you. 6 is recommended. On to 7, which is essentially the same discussion with the capital side.
Sure. So 7, the article now has the recommended capital supplement. So as part of the budget document book that I sent to everyone, and I know it's 400 pages, but the capital plan, the 5-year capital improvement plan is in there. Under the bylaws of the town, there's a capital planning committee that includes representation from Finance Committee that we went to last night. They take a look at the capital 5-year capital improvement requests from town and school departments, and they work together with myself and Wendy to basically create a ranked prioritization of what those capital improvements ought to be. We, of course, have conversations about funding, but really the job of capital planning is to prioritize it from a needs-based perspective. And then it is my responsibility to make a recommendation on what we have funds on hand to fund at a given town meeting. And we have a handful of items typically that we hold off on funding until the fall when we know what free cash is, things that we cyclically purchase, but like to do so with cash. And I'll tick through some of those here, and then I'll talk about the more unique items and answer any questions you have. So 2 marked cruisers for police is a standard annual request from the police department that is recommended by the Capital Committee and myself. That is the first item there. IT for information technology for the town. We do a staggered hardware, software replacement. I think we're on 4-year cycles. This is the annual increment there, 33,000 and change. There's a server upgrade that was programmed by capital planning that we again didn't fund in the spring, but we have funding on hand now from the free cash that we discussed earlier that I recommend we use. Similarly, school department, computers and technology, 284,000. It's various computers, laptops, projectors, things of that nature. We'll come back to the feasibility study. Online permitting system, 122,000. So Easton was a leader in the Commonwealth, is one of the first municipalities to start to shake the cobwebs off of antiquated paper permitting processes and move to online permitting. And then 10 years passed. So our software is frankly dated at this point. It was built incrementally as funding allowed over many, many years. And so there's a variety of usability features, quality of life features for businesses and residents that are just not there. And there's various inefficiencies on the admin side. I mean, the systems work, but they don't work at the level of effectiveness they could. Probably the most glaring example is that because these pieces of software were built over time, they're all discrete modules that do not synthesize with one another. And so if you are opening a restaurant in Easton, as an example, you will, depending on what you're doing, you will need a license or 2 from the select board with perhaps overlay from the State Alcoholic Beverages Control Commission, planning and zoning board review. If you're doing outdoor dining, zoning board of appeals hearing. You will have building permits if it's new construction, board of health involvement if there's septic. So it's already 5 or 6 agencies, and you will need to make a username and a login and credentials for all 6 of them because we don't have a unified system that was built all at once. It's doable, but it takes away from the benefit offered to economic development of reliable and quick permitting when you have those just kind of really outdated aspects. So this would allow us to basically redevelop and relaunch all of our e-permitting softwares across all of our regulatory boards and internal departments, which we already have, but again, just bring it into one comprehensive suite, unified login. And the challenge I just mentioned on the front facing side, staff have that as well. So I have a login for like 14 portals. And I remember 2 or 3 at a time. So it will make that more reliable. It's good for transparency. If you go on our website now, you can see every single building permit issued in Easton. You just search by address and name. It will allow us to do things like integrate it with our existing GIS system so that we have better data management and things like floor prints for first responders and things like that over time. So a really good business feature, good for transparency and good for administration to be able to do a better job with the staff we have. So, and it would incorporate the data transfer as well of putting all those disparate pieces under one umbrella. So that's that piece that was programmed a couple of years ago and has been deferred due to a lack of available funds. We are also pursuing a state grant for this at the same time, but we like to keep our options open. So I'm programming it in a capital budget. If we do end up winning that grant, we would just not spend the money, even though we're authorized to. In DPW, you have a couple of vehicles. For the newer members in the spring, you'll see a much more robust presentation on this, but every winter and spring, all the department heads go and give a very detailed presentation, usually with capital replacement memos and PowerPoints and asset management plans to the capital committee. Dave Field is our TPW director, and he always uses a very effective example showing the fleet replacement age of general fund DPW, which is administration, highway, snow removal, versus water, which is enterprise funded. And on average, the general fund vehicles are, I think, 50% older. We have to spend significantly more money on repairs just because the general fund availability of capital is worse than that of an enterprise fund where you can just adjust rates if you need more money. Since free cash is good this year, we want to fund 2 more of those requested vehicles that were deferred. In order for DPW to just tread water, they need to spend 600,000 or more a year on fleet replacement. With this, it'll push them over to about 700, and that's probably the first time in many, many, many years that they've actually made any positive headway in reducing the age of their fleet. Finally, there is a small amount, a matching grant for self-contained breathing apparatus fill station for the fire department. And then before getting into feasibility, does anyone have any questions about the capital planning process or these recommendations?
I just have one on, and you might have called it out. I don't know if I captured it wrong, but that online permitting system upgrade, I'm assuming this is not, there's not a third-party vendor that you're buying this whole cloth from. This is going to be essentially you're hiring, or there's a programmatic upgrade to that existing system that's going to then provide that single sign-on association.
It is a third-party vendor, but it's the one that we've already worked with in the past. So
so it's their system.
It's their system, and so Easton was like the beta basically many years ago, and they have since expanded throughout the Commonwealth and upgraded as they iterated, and now they would we would work with them to rebuild it.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions on any of those pieces? Shreyan, go for it.
Hi, Connor. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. You said we were applying for a grant for the permitting system. And I'm wondering if we can apply for the grant first. So if we could take out the 122 out, right? And just know that it's something that we want to do, apply for the grant. It seems like we're really good at asking and really getting what we asked for, and just not have the 122 in the 1.3.
So we could, and the reason why I'm not recommending that path at this time is 2 reasons. One, the state likes to see that the localities are willing to put something on the table and put some of their own money in it. So by getting authorization for this, it could actually increase the likelihood that we get something rather than nothing, which has actually been the case. So, and I appreciate the compliment on our grant awards, but we've actually been turned down on this one a few times. But this is, we're kind of at the contingency plan level. So that's one piece. And the second piece is just in the level of free cash. So if the award should be announced, I think this winter, but the next town meeting's not till May. So we can go to town meeting, receive this funding, and just sit on it for 6 or 7 weeks. And if we get the grant, we won't spend it, and it goes right back into free cash. And so there's no harm.
I'm just excited that the stabilization fund, I believe, if I'm saying that correctly, is actually growing.
Yes.
And we're getting closer to the 10%.
Yes.
So just like, yes, that's a good project. It's a good goal to have.
Yes.
My second question is on the fire grant matching funds.
Mm-hmm.
Are we matching something with? Is that what we're doing here?
Yep. And so Wendy, correct me if I misspeak, but I believe there is a pending grant for the fire department from the state where they want to see us put some skin in the game.
Okay.
It's actually a federal grant, Assistance to Firefighters Grant, FEMA.
Okay. Okay, good. See, we're good at it. We're good at it.
And I believe we were actually awarded that.
Okay. Okay, good.
But that's our obligation, that piece of it.
That would be our obligation, yes, our share.
Okay. And I guess my last question, sorry, on the school department computers and technology, that 284,000, are we getting new computers for the students or for the administration?
Those would be for the students. I mean, there might be some for administration, but basically when the pandemic hit, people were, students were at home, they had to take like every last piece of equipment they could and distribute that out. So,
Right.
and some of them were pretty old.
Yes.
So this will help them to get on a more like cyclical replacement schedule.
Right.
And also just give them that flexibility to have that money set aside for when they need it, because a lot of times if we wait until the annual town meeting, that's kind of too late for them. Like they really would rather, if they're going to purchase things, do it in the spring.
Okay, so we're voting on this on we're bringing it to town meeting on the 8th, and then the money will be readily available so that the schools can actually purchase at their discretion.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great questions. Does anyone else have anything before Connor dives back into the feasibility piece? Also, welcome to Christina. Good to see you. We have the whole crew on. What a day. Okay, Connor, back to you for the feasibility talk.
So this is good. I think half of your committee either just saw me at budget subcommittee or at Capitol last night, so they'll be able to tell you if I'm giving different stories to different boards. So feasibility. So this was an item that was programmed a year and a half or so ago as a placeholder. That was less. It was a placeholder in the capital improvement plan of 200,000 from DPW. So this traces back to in 2019, working with the Municipal Building Committee, which is a citizen committee who are responsible for municipal building projects over a certain dollar amount, working with the Director of Public Works. They requested and Dave Field produced a report in 2019 on the state of our municipal facilities that basically took the existing 2014 comprehensive facilities assessment report from Dora and Whittier and updated the cost to 2019 numbers, which we now would need to update again, to make recommendations on repair and replacement needs for municipal facilities. Thought being at that time that we were moving productively toward the school's major needs being addressed through the MSBA pipeline. And as you know, we are now actively under construction with the elementary school project. So we put a $200,000 placeholder just to kind of get the marker in the sand, so to speak, that it's in the improvement plan to make it clear this is something we're going to need to start seriously thinking about. Back in fiscal 21. It was deferred kind of indefinitely at that time due to a lack of funding. Again, with the free cash availability we have, the progress we're making on the school building project, and the reality that facilities projects like this are 5+ year endeavors, and these buildings in question are 50+ years old. I think the time is now to start moving forward and taking the first steps we need to take, and that would be a feasibility phase appropriation. So the report from Dave, which is on the website, and I can share directly because I know there's too much stuff online and you could get lost, made a pretty clear recommendation that if you've been in our public safety and public works buildings, I think you would concur with, and if you have not, we invite you to come see them. The public works, police, and fire, particularly on Lothrop Street and water at Bay Road, are too old, they are too small, they have various code violations, they do not meet the needs of the personnel or the equipment or the community that are housed, work there, and are served by them. Not dissimilar to what we knew about the elementary schools. Many of these buildings were built 50+ years ago. In some cases, they're retrofitted buildings that are more than a century old. For one example, water is not ADA accessible. There's a large stairwell to get into the building. It's a public building and there is no accessibility to get into it. There are various environmental issues with these properties, such as DPW on Center Street not being compliant with stormwater regulations and not having sufficient space. If you've ever seen DPW, you basically have a facility plopped right into a neighborhood on Center Street. They do not have the space they need to adequately cover and protect their fleet, which just accelerates the aging and depreciation of those vehicles, increases our maintenance costs, and is a negative cycle that we don't want to be in. Could go on, and we will, if this moves forward, significantly more, with much more detail. This funding of $500,000 would, we feel, be sufficient to bring an owner's project manager on board start getting design professionals engaged to really start looking at schematic design. But before getting into the building aspect, looking at real estate, because just the buildings I named, police, fire, and public works, are, depending on how you want to count it, 3 or 4 buildings on 3 or 4 pieces of land, Lothrop Street, Center Street, and Bay Road. There's a lot of pieces up in the air there. One of the main things that needed to occur early in the school building project was determining, because this current school project actually started as just center school replacement. And part of it was early feasibility studies was, does that make sense to just do center school, or do we just deal with all of it and do a consolidation? And that's where we ended up going. It's more cost effective. There's a variety of benefits of that. But we need to do the work on the municipal side, and to do the work, we have to get started with bringing some professionals on board to look at the real estate we have on hand, what the needs are. There are unique aspects to this, particularly as it involves fire, where anytime you're thinking about building a new station or maybe a new location, you need to be really cognizant of service response times. So there's a lot of moving pieces. And we need to start doing work to quantify those and come up with some alternatives, options that we can consider through the select board and as a community if we want to be serious about advancing, including coming up with cost, because any project of this size would down the road necessitate a debt exclusion. So the first step would be feasibility phase. This funding, for perspective, 4 years ago, in November of 2017, town meeting appropriated $1 million for feasibility phase of the current elementary school project that's being built. It took 2 years for that to go through feasibility and schematic design and get to a place where there could be conversations about a debt exclusion. And from there, it's been 2 more years. We're actively under construction, and it'll be another year plus. So you're looking at 5 to 6 years, even on a project that moves relatively well. These buildings are already in a rough state. So I think, you know, we've been successful with these projects so far. Free cash can afford advancing this, and we also anticipate other funding sources. If should 500,000 not cover the entirety of feasibility phase, depending on how many options we want to consider, there's currently a 40B before the zoning board that has an executed mitigation agreement that, if it's approved, would allocate another $250,000 towards design for public safety, public works building replacement. And that could be an additional source of funds to keep this moving. So I know it's a lot, but I'm happy to kind of answer any questions about that.
Connor, one question I have before I'll kick it to everybody else is that would this follow a similar path to the obviously the school building process, which some people might be familiar with? There was a distinct government entity that was associated with that as far as the approval processes and the applying processes. This doesn't necessarily obviously have that same type of governing board, but would there be a for lack of a better term, a DPW a subcommittee that would be aligned to this to help drive this? Is that a possibility here?
It would be the municipal building committee. So the municipal building committee would basically fulfill the role that you see the school planning committee doing now.
Got it. Awesome. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions on this one?
So just one question, Connor, are you saying 500,000 per year, or?
No, this is a one-time, it would be a capital allocation. So this is a $500,000 expense. As far as the annual cost of a hypothetical debt exclusion, we don't know.
No, for the feasibility study.
No, this is a one-time request.
Okay.
It may, again, we spent, I think, $750-ish on the feasibility phase of the school. So okay. 500 will get us moving in a meaningful direction. If the ZBA approves the project in front of it, which is their call, of course, but the select board already has an executed MOU for another $250,000. So that gets you to the 750. Okay. So if we do need additional funds, we would have to go through the same process, justify it, go to capital, come to finance committee, go to select board, go to town meeting again.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Robert.
Kelly, you go first. Kelly, Robert, then I'll go.
I just had a question about what exactly happens during that study. So I know with the school building, we ended up finding some funds that the state or the federal government gave us to offset the cost for the taxpayers.
That's right.
And so Does that happen as part of the study, that when you're trying to figure out which plan to go with, they also look at potential grants and funding sources out there?
So there's good news and there's bad news. The good news is, yes, we will look at grants. The bad news is there is pretty much no universe in which we will receive as much grants as the school project, because there is a devoted state entity called the Massachusetts School Building Authority that exists in our state, that it has a dedicated revenue source from state tax revenue, whose sole job it is to grant millions to school building projects to defray the cost to taxpayers on the municipal level, recognizing how costly these projects are. Unfortunately for all of us, no such entity exists for other municipal buildings. There are bills introduced pretty much annually, including by our senators Timilty and Brady, to do so, but they have never been adopted. We, using a royal we, and you were all happy to be part of it, and feel free to make phone calls. We regularly lobby our delegation to try to advance a program of that type, because the costs of these projects are significant. But there is nothing in existence now. The Commonwealth is going through its own process of determining how it wants to manage its ARPA, the American Rescue Plan funds. And one of the pieces of testimony that was submitted to them was by State Auditor Suzanne Bump, that to her credit, she did a wonderful report on the massive funding gap that exists. It was primarily focused on Western Mass, but it is applicable to the entire Commonwealth for public facilities and roads. And it made the case that to the extent it can be done so compliant with the federal law, that the Commonwealth consider making significant funding available for buildings. And I submitted testimony on behalf of Easton, reiterating and amplifying exactly that, to make that point. So we will go after grants. The main, through feasibility and through establishing a design team, we would certainly get good insight from those folks, but there are typically not 10 million plus. I think for a school project we're going to receive 30 something million. There's no I would be misrepresenting what I believe to be true professionally if I said that I think we could get that amount of grants. We won't.
Thank you. It actually seems like it's good timing then if something does come through on the ARPA funds, since they have to be spent in the next 4 years, right?
That is correct. And depending on where the infrastructure and social program bills go, there could be other federal funding pipelines that open up. Interest is not going to get cheaper. Free cash is probably not going to get better. So and we are in a situation where the exempt debt costs for the school building look like they're going to come in meaningfully less than what we had thought. So none of this is to marginalize that, these things are expensive and complicated and take a lot of time and energy and commitment and support from voters, but there are at least a lot of factors in our favor.
Forget who was going after. Thanks, Kelly. I forgot who was going after Kelly.
No, I think I was, but Shireen and Kelly kind of got to the questions I was asking. Connor, just more specifically on this feasibility study, do we get this at a timeline? Is there a timeline for completion of a feasibility study?
That would be something that we would negotiate as part of the contract for the owner's project management services. But a lot of that's really going to depend on any contract of the size would be awarded by the select board and managed by myself and Dave Field and working with municipal building. So it's the findings are going to probably drive that, right? Because if expediency is the priority, we could just go with one or two options and go to voters and say, here's what we're going to do. But if we want to really kind of kick the tires and think about, okay, there's a lot of different combinations you could do. Maybe you do 2 buildings on this one site or 3 on this site and 1 on this site. You could be at this for quite some time. So there's a balance there of kind of appropriately analyzing a variety of meaningful options without engaging in kind of analysis paralysis where you just are spinning your tires in committee for 4 years. So I think looking at the school timeline feasibility, from feasibility to the completion of schematic design with budget ready numbers to go for construction cost appropriations from town meeting and an exclusion was roughly 2 years. So I think you're looking at 1 to 2 years.
Thank you.
Connor and Wendy, any reason to not take the full 750 now and push 250 back if you don't use it? Just thinking because you're looking at a 2 or 3 year timeline for your study, potentially maybe in 2 or 3 years we're not in a good place, not in as good of a place as we are today, and that 250 may not be available to you.
It's a good question, and it's really just that's kind of a question of approach. I think you know, the principals involved here feel that even if that mitigation funding falls through, 500 will be enough for us to get moving in a really meaningful direction. And if we need more, we'll have town meeting in the spring. And we would, and I hope I'm evidencing this now, we would have no qualms about coming forward and saying, hey, we thought this other thing would work out. It didn't, we need more. So we don't think, even if that mitigation funding is not there, I don't think it will kind of be a impediment to us advancing prior to town meeting.
Yeah, I don't want you to ruin the momentum, right? That's what I'm trying to get at.
Sure, no, and it's a great question. Please remind me if in April I'm coming to finance committee for an emergency fund transfer because we got everything done.
No, I hope we're in the same spot financially as we are, now.
Sure. No, it's a great question. Thank you.
Any other questions on Article 7?
Motion to recommend Article 7.
I'll take that as a no. So we have a motion. Do I have a second?
Lamb, second.
We're just sprinting around. This is great. All right, let's go down the list that I've recalculated based on everybody that's here. DiNapoli.
DiNapoli, yes.
DiNardo.
DiNardo, yes.
Diaz.
Yes.
Petro.
Yes.
Jenkins.
Jenkins, yes.
Lamb.
Lamb, yes.
Olson.
Olson, yes.
Famosi.
Famosi is yes.
And Patrick is a yes. Helen is yes. All right, 7 is recommend. So the only one left for us before we go through we let you guys run off and we do our quick reallocation is 9. Now, Michael made the point that there was some additional questions being asked. I'm paraphrasing, but essentially the select board was looking for a little bit of additional information on this one. Mm-hmm. He suggested that we at least pause on it until we have Connor and Wendy here to do a deeper dive explanation of it.
Sure.
Do you want to just give us the high level for it?
Sure. So this is in relation to a trust fund that exists as part of a bequest of the late Oliver Ames Jr. That is for the benefit of the highways and schools of Easton. And the town meeting has historically appointed the trustees who are responsible for managing the trust. The actual kind of management of a trust is in accordance with the will, is kind of outside of my role and our role and town meeting's role. And it's fairly prescriptive. There are specific standards laid out in the bequest as far as Easton needing to spend more than the median level per capita of local tax money on education as a show of local effort in order for the trust to then contribute. And we do in Easton spend, although our per pupil spending is below average when you take all funding sources together, that's really a function of us receiving minimal state aid. Our local tax contribution is above average. So we meet that standard of effort annually. And the trust contributes funding to the town annually that we actually account. It's on our ledger on the budget. It's listed under special revenue sources and trusts. And Wendy, I believe it's approximately 400,000 a year.
Yeah, it's like 425 or 435.
Which is a meaningful amount, particularly annually. And then that's allocated through the general fund between DPW and schools. So this article has nothing to do with any of those financial aspects. It has to do with new trustees being appointed. These are 2 new trustees being recommended by the remaining existing trustee, David Ames Jr., who speaks highly of and recommends these 2. to replace one vacancy from a trustee who has stepped down, and to add a third trustee effectively for purposes of planning for Mr. Ames to bring new trustees up to speed with the management of the fund.
So just to be clear, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so the board wanted to just get a little more background, and Dottie and I met with and spoke with Mr. Ames, and we are comfortable with it.
So that was going to be the one question I had, which you just cleared, just to make sure everyone is on the same page. There's going to be 3 now, which is Henry Ames, Kevin Kidd, and then continuing trustee David Ames.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. Excellent. Does anyone have any questions?
Are there any timeframes associated with the trustees' terms or anything like that, or is that just part of the terms of the trust?
So the appointments, and we went back, and these go back till we went back to like 1926, I think, as it says here. Town meeting just kind of appoints folks, and they stay on until they decide they don't want to be on. And usually, I think it might be mentioned here, the current one of the trustees being replaced was appointed in 1991.
Yep. So
they served for quite a significant tenure.
Yeah, so it looks like a happy seat, so that's good.
Any other questions? Seeing none.
Motion to recommend Article 9.
Do I have a second?
Second, DiNapoli.
Thank you. Let's go down our list. DiNapoli.
DiNapoli, yes.
DiNardo.
DiNardo, yes.
Diaz.
Diaz is a yes.
DePietro.
DePietro, yes.
Jenkins.
Jenkins is a yes.
Lamb.
Lamb, yes.
Olson.
Olson, yes.
Famosi.
Most is a yes.
And Patrick Hillen is a yes. Excellent. All right, that's everything. You said there's nothing for 5, so placeholder that select board will remove at town meeting.
Yeah, if
November 8th.
come up, right?
If nothing else comes up, true, yeah. I think that's it. Wendy and Connor, we thank you for your time. Unless you guys have anything else to add, we will let you go, and we'll do our last bit and get everybody out of here.
Sure. Just to say thank you, and to plead that everyone, obviously, you are obligated to be at town meeting on November 8th by virtue of your role, but we need 100 voters to come out, and the special town meeting warrant is all super important kind of fiduciary stuff, but it's not necessarily the kind of thing that excites voters on a Monday night. So please encourage your voting family and friends to participate in their local government, because if we do not get 100 voters, then we cannot do any of these things, and that would be an awful shame. So spread the good word. It's on the town's website, the warrant's online, it's on our Facebook, it's easy to share. So thank you.
We have had town meetings where we are furiously texting people to roll on in because we are not seeing full need yet. It's a good call out.
Yeah, there may or may not have been years where high school seniors were pulled off basketball courts.
Allegedly.
Good. Civic duty before hoop duty. That's the way it goes. Connor, Wendy, thank you so much. I appreciate you guys coming in.
Thank you all.
Guys.
I'll be getting the finance plan out also. I don't know, maybe next week, but that'll be out. If you're wondering maybe what the finance plan is, it's basically a listing of all the votes and the funding sources. And if you'd like to look at prior finance plans, they're on the town's webpage on the financial information section. You got to scroll down though. I think it's like at the very bottom. And you can see all the quite a few of the past town meeting finance plans.
Thank you, Wendy. All right, guys, we'll let you go. We will finish up and then we will go as well. Thanks so much again.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you. Have a good night.
All right. So with that, we are pretty much done. We just have to discuss the assignment of the subcommittees. So I sent around that list earlier today. I don't know if everybody's had a chance to take a look at it, but it's essentially the budget. Oh, I forgot to ask Connor. Damn it, man, it doesn't matter. I was going to ask him whether or not dispatch is still something that we should line item because of it's more of a shared resource as opposed to a singular resource. But long story short, we have cluster 1, cluster 2, and cluster 3. Cluster 1 being the collection of smaller individual boards like select board and FinCom, cluster 2 being accountant, clerk for treasurer and assessors, and then cluster 3 being police, dispatch, fire, and ambulance, with dispatch having an asterisk. Does any one of the new 3 members specifically Brian, Jay, and Robert. Does anyone have one that they'd like to go after, that they'd like to be associated with? Keeping in mind that this is something where once Connor gives us the high sign in budget season, you would be reaching out to these guys and saying, essentially, hey, Patrick Heller from the FinCom calling to discuss budget, anything that we can look at, any trends, any new changes that we should be aware of before we get to that point of budget season and you guys give your presentation to the FinCom and the select board. Anybody have a preference or something they want to volunteer for before we start?
Just in looking at this, Patrick, why don't I look at doing the cluster 3, police, dispatch, fire, the ambulance, especially, I guess, since we're looking at some type of new facility for police and fire.
Yeah, I'll take, does anyone else have any objections of the other two of you?
Oh, none, no objection.
All right, so Robert, congratulations. You have one of our biggest budgetary scenarios. I think you can handle it though, considering your background. So Jay and Brian, we're down to the heady face-off of select board and FinCom versus accountant and collector treasurer. I can assign it if you guys don't care. If you guys have something,
I think one has a little bit more appeal to me than 2, but Brian, I don't really care one way or the other.
That makes it a lot easier because 2 has a lot more appeal to me than 1. So
okay.
Subject to change at next year's reassignment.
Yeah, we will. I will say this: I've been holding on to the library with a death grip since the day I got it. So there's no chance that's coming up, just FYI. But everything else shifts around relatively easily. So any excuse I have to just call Uma in chat is usually good. So I have cluster 1, if I'm correct, as Jay, cluster 2 as Brian, and cluster 3 as Robert.
That's correct.
I don't think we have to vote on this, but I've been wrong so many times in the past. So we're going to go with that. I will double check, and if we have to bring it up at the next meeting, it's fine. Again, not a timely thing because we don't have to worry about it until we're actually deep into budget season. But I'll update this document and send it back around to everybody so they have that. And then if there's any other questions, we can dive in when we need to. So that was easy. So with that, we're pretty much done, unless there's any other questions, any comments, anything that anybody wants to share or ask about prior to town meeting, which I don't know if I told you all or if I have to reiterate, we have a front row seat facing the audience, not looking up at the stage with the audience. So you guys get to stare at your constituents as they ask you, why did you vote yes on that? And you don't have an answer. You're just like, sorry.
It's really just Jeremy that they asked that too.
Yes. That's what the chair's role was to be.
Yeah, I take the brunt of it for all of you. So if there's any other questions, I'll open it up now.
I have a question about reaching out to people. Do you provide like an email template that we would send out to our different departments that we're assigned to?
It's a great question. No, we haven't in the past. It's usually a little bit more casual. Everybody sort of had their own version of it. Essentially, when we first started doing it, I think I was brand new to the FinCom, and we first started doing it as this proactive piece. It was essentially, hey, the budget information or the contact information or whoever it is that you should be reaching out to is publicly available information. So we all went to the website and we grabbed the right people. We had some exposure to people like Dave from DPW, et cetera. Uma, my perennial example, but we essentially just set up time. So I sent an email and said, hey, Patrick Heller, FinCom, here's what I'm looking to do. I just want to have an engagement. It builds a relationship so that as I'm on the finance committee, as budgetary things change, I can obviously come back to you, but also I just want to get a read as to this year. So there's no template per se. You're sort of able to set it up your own. You can just call as well if you can get somebody on the phone. Great question. And then just to reiterate, we don't do that until Connor says, hey, departments have enough of a budget pulled together for you to start engaging. Did somebody have something?
And of course, Kelly, if you create a template, share.
Yeah, we'll take it.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to say. It may make sense as we present this, right? We're all comparing similar information amongst the different clusters. So if we had a template, we could all just kind of hit on the same topics and be consistent with that. And it may help, the others that are impacted by what we do kind of see our reasoning. I'm not trying to make more work for us, but the operations and efficiency guy in me wants to make it a template that we can all do, right?
Does anyone want to volunteer to make the template? Mike DiPietro, thanks, man. That's great. Thanks so much.
I did want to offer out one comment or suggestion for the folks going to the schools. I think it's the first year you're heading that way. There's a lot of moving pieces there to set up those initial meetings. So I'd recommend reaching out in advance. Like some of the other clusters I've worked on, you can kind of have that informal connection there to make that discussion happen. But with the schools, there's the school committee, a lot of different department heads that are involved there. So reaching out early to kind of get everybody involved. And I think last year, we assigned 2 people to schools, correct? Where it's kind of a shared.
Yeah, I think we had Christina. I think you are primary, and Shireen, I think you were also interested in engaging. Is that correct?
No, I'm happy with my cluster.
Okay.
But Tim, if you have any documents or notes from previous years, like areas that I should focus on or specific questions or any advice or guidance that you have, I would appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big cluster. So I would just reach out early and often where I had library a long time ago before it was so duly obtained. It was a little easier because you could have that one meeting for the year and kind of get the
Right.
budget out. The schools is a rapidly moving target, as I'm sure we're all aware of. So reaching out more than once is highly recommended, and reaching out early so they can kind of coordinate the moving pieces there to meet that objective for the meeting is always a good idea. And then of course there's multiple schools as well you have to do that with. So it does kind of take a little bit of time to schedule that out. So just be aware of that when you move forward with it. And of course I'm happy to help in any capacity.
Okay, thank you.
And Christina, I was kidding. I'm happy to help, and you know, you take the lead. And
All right, I appreciate it, Shireen. I will take you up on that. Thank you.
I knew not to open my mouth.
It's regret there. I mean, it is the biggest ticket item on the budget, so it's got some heft to it. All right. So with that, anyone else?
Motion to adjourn.
Wait, before you dive in there.
I said I volunteer to make the template, but I feel like it should be someone that's actually engaged with clusters before, or maybe a group of people, and then we can all kind of make comments on it. But I do like the idea of having it be systemized.
Yeah,
so that we're
I'm with you on that too, Kelly. If you guys have anything that you've done in the last couple of cycles that I can have a look at, I can start to kind of pull out the common themes and questions we should be asking, and we can start to maybe document it a bit.
Let's do this then. If anyone has, I'm looking at like Mike and myself, I'll double check and look back through my other stuff. And Tim, if you have any emails that you have sent, you have to have them because of the requirements. But if you could grab anything that is your initial outreach, forward that around. I'll find whatever it is that I've sent out in the past, just my boilerplate. And then, yeah, we can build off that. You know, if Kelly and Brian, if you want to take a stab at it, we can easily adopt that. And then that's a resource that we can continue to use going forward. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, and it could be a template for the next generation too, right?
Exactly.
So it's consistent.
Yeah.
When you guys run for re-election and get ceremoniously thrown back in.
Well, I was just videotaped on YouTube with a fly fishing net on top of my head, so I'm not sure that
You're in.
Candidate for re-election at this point.
Well, I mean, to be fair, the child with the fly fishing moment could also theoretically be part of your campaign committee. So I'm just throwing it out there as an option.
Could absolutely, they are cute.
Holding signs equals cute, right? It always works. I was going to say something before Mike threw. Oh, last thing I want to say is that just thanks to everybody. So that quick meeting, easy meeting tonight. Thanks to everybody, and also obviously just reiterating the congratulations to the 3 new appointees. Looking forward to seeing you guys at town meeting, masked, 6 feet away. We'll wave, fist bump, etc. But with that,
is it
Mike,
really 6 feet or 3?
I think it's 3 feet, whatever it is. The
Elbows.
table's not 6. I mean, we have some distance. It's not bad.
We do have some distance.
I still stress about it, but it's still, you know. With that, Michael,
Motion to adjourn. DePietro.
Do I have a second?
Yes, second.
DiNapoli.
Napoli, yes.
DiNardo.
DiNardo, yes.
Diaz.
Diaz is a yes, and
DePietro.
DePietro, yes.
Jenkins.
Jenkins is a yes.
Lamb.
Lamb, yes.
Olson.
Olson, yes.
Lamosi.
Mostly yes.
And Patrick is a yes. Thanks, everybody. I will give you back the rest of your evening, and I will see you, barring any complications, on the next meeting and or the November 8th in person. Thanks so much.
Awesome.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys. Take care.
Take
Bye all.
care. Have a good evening all.